Imagine waking up on an ordinary morning and upon facing the mirror, realizing that what reflects your image no longer belongs to you. Your body, once familiar and human, is now a grotesque tangle of elongated, fragile limbs, resembling the legs of an insect covered by a rigid, gleaming carapace that imprisons your flesh. Thus begins the drama of Gregor Samsa, the protagonist of Franz Kafka's unsettling work The Metamorphosis, when he wakes up one day transformed into a monstrous creature, a gigantic insect. This metamorphosis, however, goes beyond matter, surpassing the limits of the physical and plunging into the abyss of the existential. Gregor does not become a deformed being by mere chance, but instead embodies what his soul had already become. A submissive being, shaped by the desires of others. A devoted son to the point of self-erasure. An exhausted worker reduced to a mere provider for a family that consumed him slowly. Throughout his life, Gregor strove to meet expectations, bending himself into silence, renunciation, and sacrifice, living for others and erasing himself. His identity had been corroded, piece by piece, until only a void remained, an echo of what he might once have been. By becoming a beetle, he does not lose his humanity. Instead, he finally reveals himself as the alienated being that had long inhabited his essence. In the skin of this repulsive creature, Gregor becomes the ultimate emblem of alienation, not only from society or his own family, but above all from himself. Kafka, in his genius, does not offer us a direct explanation for this absurd transformation. On the contrary, he invites us to interpret it. Could this deformed body be the materialization of blind sacrifice, the distorted reflection of a life lived for others, where the self was relegated to oblivion? Gregor's family, accustomed to depending on him, saw him as an instrument, as support. And so, when he could no longer fulfill the role of provider, they began to see him as a burden, an obstacle. All the years of dedication were discarded without ceremony. The metamorphosis was not a rupture, but the logical culmination of a life marked by unconditional giving and the complete loss of self. Gregor represents the tragic altruist, the one who erases himself, believing that his devotion will bring him love and belonging. But the contempt his family shows him, once they no longer need him, lays bare a brutal truth. Pleasing others is an illusion that comes at a high price. The more you give, the more you lose yourself. No matter how much we seek recognition, approval, or belonging, these achievements are, most of the time, illusory and fleeting, like sand slipping through our fingers. This compulsive altruism becomes a fragile currency whose value depends on the fickle gaze of others. A gaze that shifts, that demands more and more, that eventually exhausts itself. And when this currency loses its worth, it not only fails to bring acceptance but begins to exact a heavy price: abandonment, rejection, oblivion. Worse still, this constant self-sacrifice can become not only useless but devastating, slowly consuming the soul of the one who lives as a hostage to the need to please. Do you genuinely like people, or do you know someone who lives to please them? This video is an invitation to reflect on the hidden cost of always wanting to be accepted, on the poison disguised in the sweetness of pleasing. Let's explore why this need to please is a trap and how we can break free from it before it consumes us. In the eyes of the world, criticizing someone who dedicates themselves to others is almost heresy. After all, what could be wrong with generosity, with kindness? Is there anything more noble than offering oneself for the good of others, shaping one's own life around someone else? Such people are praised, loved, and central in the lives of many. But if we look beneath the surface, we often find a hidden core of unconscious egoism, a deep and silent desire for acceptance, for love, for not being left on the margins. Their kindness, then, is not purely altruistic, but a silent exchange. I do everything for you, I shape myself to your wishes, I erase myself, and in return, you will give me what I most fear losing: your approval, your presence, your affirmation. Deep down, their generosity is an emotional transaction, and its cost is, at times, their very freedom to exist as themselves. Let's begin by understanding what it truly means to be a people pleaser. There are many ways to define this behavior, but among them all I found one that stands out for its simplicity and clarity, recorded in the Merriam-Webster dictionary: someone or something that pleases or desires to please people. However, this definition is superficial, as it ignores the complexity of the motives that drive such an individual. Going a little further, the Cambridge Dictionary offers a more revealing perspective: someone who cares deeply about whether others like them and who constantly seeks others' approval for their actions. It is this second definition that guides the narrative of this video, and it is upon it that the critical perspective I propose here is built. From this perspective, the people pleaser is driven not by pure kindness, but by a deep desire for validation, by a thirst to be accepted, seen, and legitimized. At the core of this behavior lies a compulsion, the compulsion to mold oneself in order to earn another's approval. The central concern of the person who seeks to please is not with themselves, but with how others perceive them. They live to meet expectations, to attend to the needs of others, often ignoring or sacrificing their own. The motto is clear: others first, and perhaps, someday, themselves. If the price to be paid is self-sacrifice, whether for acceptance, affection, or even for a simple and fleeting gesture of recognition, they will pay it without hesitation. And it is at this point that the cycle becomes dangerous, almost vicious, because the people pleaser believes that this effort will bring love. Yet what they receive is often only a shadow of love, a conditional and fragile reflection, always on the verge of disappearing. I mentioned earlier, albeit briefly, my father, someone who, wrapped in his narcissism, never accepted any questioning about himself. He was never formally diagnosed, as he vehemently rejected the idea that anything in his behavior could be misaligned. His disdain for any suggestion of a problem was absolute. This form of self-abandonment not only distances people from their deepest selves, but also inevitably leads them into relationships marked by imbalanced relationships in which one person wears themselves out endlessly trying to satisfy the other. Such relationships do not flourish, they suffocate, fed by a dynamic in which one person's identity dissolves in order to sustain the expectations of the other. Making my father happy was like chasing an illusion, like running after a mirage that never materializes, a constant, relentless struggle, a search for something that was never within my reach. It was he who shaped, or tried to shape, the person I was supposed to be. It was he who determined my values, my preferences, my dreams. At a certain point, I no longer knew who lived inside me. What once brought me pleasure became a source of guilt. What I believed myself to be turned into something to be denied, rejected, forgotten. A dense shadow formed within me, filled with everything that had been suppressed, with all the qualities banished by the dominant figure, by the father who demanded devotion and control. This Jungian shadow grew in silence, nourished by everything he would not allow me to be, my desires, my goals, even my attraction to women. I didn't know whether these things truly came from me or whether they were just projections of his will, remnants of the mold he tried to force me into. When I finally freed myself from that yoke and chose my own path, I realized I needed to rebuild myself almost from scratch. I had to relearn how to be. Although my stance may sound radical, I believe my journey is, above all, a warning, an alert about the dangers that surround those who live to please, and about the price one pays for placing the desires of others above their own. Even those we love can, whether unintentionally or intentionally, dilute our essence, distort our truth, and pull us away from who we are. When we live to satisfy others, identity becomes fluid, shaped by the contours of someone else's desires. We become reflections rather than subjects, and like Gregor Samsa, who defined himself as a submissive son and tireless provider, we lose our footing when we can no longer fulfill that role. His transformation was not only physical, it was the collapse of an identity built upon the needs of others. When he ceased to be useful, he also ceased to be someone. The moment my father stopped being my guiding north felt like an abyss opening, but it was also the first step toward freeing myself from that burden. A void appeared, filled with questions about who I was, about what remained of me when there was no longer a voice dictating my path. And perhaps it was precisely this emptiness that led me to dive into philosophy and psychology, that pushed me to create this channel as a way to rebuild, to seek answers, to make meaning. In the end, pleasing others at any cost is an act of profound self-neglect. It is a renunciation of autonomy, of the right to be whole, of the power to make free choices and to pursue what truly nourishes us from within. Those who live this way do not build an authentic identity. They build a facade, a molded, fragile, dependent version of themselves. The archetype of the person who tries to please others tends to struggle with saying no, something I identify with deeply. By failing to set boundaries, by failing to say no when necessary, the people pleaser ends up allowing others, almost always unconsciously, to take the reins of their life. They are the ones who, for the most part, dictate the people pleaser's schedule, priorities, steps, time, energy, and resources, all offered with alarming ease, as if they were infinite, as if they cost nothing. But the cost exists, and it is high. Pleasing others does not only consume the one who takes on this role. It can paradoxically also harm those who receive this unconditional devotion. Think, for example, of the overly protective mother, the one who carries all the household tasks on her shoulders to spare her teenage children. She cooks, cleans, and works outside the home. At first glance, her intention is noble, but the effect is doubly destructive. First, she overwhelms herself, sacrificing her health, her dreams, her individuality. Second, she prevents her children from facing reality, from learning to handle responsibilities, from growing. By shielding them from the natural consequences of their actions, she deprives them of maturation, making them dependent and fragile in the face of the world. This is the invisible trap of misdirected altruism. It is like lighting a bonfire with your own body to warm others. And if this fire is not contained, it will end up consuming not only the one who feeds it but also those they were trying to warm. The pursuit of acceptance and validation may seem like an act of love, but when it becomes a compulsion, it devours. And the question that echoes is this: is all this running after recognition really worth it? Is the acceptance of others, this highly coveted social currency, truly so precious that it justifies the continuous renunciation of oneself? Or are we overestimating its value, trapped in an instinct that no longer applies to our time? The human need for validation is not a mystery, it is inheritance. In ancestral times, being accepted by the group was a matter of life or death. We lived in small tribes, where social exclusion could mean the end. There was no option to start over somewhere else. There was no way to switch groups. We were bound to one another, and pleasing the tribe was a matter of survival. Their gaze, their approval, their protection were essential, but those times are gone. Today, the greatest achievement of modern humankind is precisely this relative independence. We still need others, it's true, but the weight of their approval has decreased drastically. As long as we respect the law, we do not need the love or approval of neighbors, coworkers, or even certain family members in order to survive. We can live, and even thrive, as the odd one out, the misunderstood one, the eccentric who doesn't fit in. We can walk without a herd. It is possible to live without friends, without applause, without being part of every circle. The imperative to please, which was once vital, is now often an unnecessary burden. Of course, there are still contexts in which pleasing others is part of the game: at work, to keep a job; in school, to earn good grades; in relationships, to cultivate harmony. But outside these specific situations, why continue feeding this insatiable hunger for validation? Human connection undoubtedly has its value, but when it stops being a choice and becomes a prison, when it demands that we abandon who we are, it ceases to be a bond and becomes a shackle. People who genuinely like us offer us the opportunity to be part of their lives, a natural invitation, not a requirement. However, when that acceptance becomes a constant battle, when we find ourselves forced to sacrifice our wishes, our days, our very being in the name of someone else's well-being, is the effort really worth it? A fascinating point in Kafka's narrative is the reaction of Gregor's family to his metamorphosis. Before, he was the source of support, the silent pillar that held everyone up. But when life reversed the roles and he went from provider to someone in need, it would have been fair to expect the family to return his dedication, to care for him, to welcome him. However, what we saw was the opposite: rejection, impatience, disgust. Those same people who had depended on him for so long turned their backs on him without remorse, revealing the rawness of human bonds, fragile, self-interested, and often one-sided. This cruel dynamic reminds us that affection is not always accompanied by gratitude. Loving or caring for someone does not guarantee reciprocity. The people we cherish the most may not be willing to give back, to carry us when we can no longer carry the world for them. It is the bare reality of bonds built on excessive sacrifice. They fall apart the moment their usefulness ends. This does not mean we should renounce kindness. On the contrary, acts of kindness are the mortar of healthy human relationships. Helping others strengthens connections and creates genuine bonds. Since ancient times, This truth has been recognized and ritualized in religious traditions, whether it's zakat in Islam, charity in Christianity, or DNA in Buddhism. All these practices view benevolence as a path to transcendence, as something sacred. But there is a vital difference between being kind and being a people pleaser. Kindness is born from a sincere desire to contribute, to add something meaningful. Compulsive pleasing, on the other hand, is a form of courtesy and investment made in the hope of receiving approval, acceptance, or love. Pleasing others is often a disguised transaction, in which the price paid is one's own well-being and the expected profit is a nod, a compliment, a safe place in someone else's heart. That's why the act of pleasing is not synonymous with genuine kindness. It is, rather, a performance, a continuous effort to secure a place that never seems fully earned. True kindness, by contrast, does not demand applause. It is free, light, made of choice rather than need. Moreover, true kindness does not require self-sacrifice. It can and should be offered from a place of balance, where you recognize yourself as just as worthy of care as those you wish to help. Being kind does not mean erasing yourself. We can act with kindness while drawing clear boundaries, respecting our own desires and needs, without expecting anything in return, without turning the act into a courtesy for validation. The deepest lesson that Kafka's Metamorphosis offers us is this: when we neglect ourselves and disregard who we are for the sake of others, we end up destroying not only our ability to care, but our very existence. A body and soul that are exhausted cannot support anyone, not even themselves. If you have the habit of giving too much, of losing yourself to fulfill others' desires, stop for a moment and ask yourself, and what about me? Yes, you. What do you want? What moves you? Inspires you, gives you meaning? I have been asking myself this question more and more, not only about the major directions of life, but also about the small choices of everyday life, the ones that quietly shape our reality. For a long time, under my father's shadow, I grew used to hiding my own desires, suppressing them to accommodate the demands of others. Expressing what I wanted felt almost impossible. I even ended up losing my connection to those desires to the point of not knowing what I truly wanted, letting myself be carried along by situations, commitments, and encounters that did nothing to fulfill me. I attended social gatherings that drained me, nurtured friendships that weren't genuine, maintained bonds out of sheer obligation. More than that, I followed paths not drawn by me but imposed by him, tracks that never aligned with my essence. And this misalignment inevitably generated suffering, a fertile ground for emptiness. The pursuit of pleasing others, when unchecked, is a sure path to self-annihilation. It is not just the denial of dreams, projects, or individuality. It is handing over the reins of your own life to someone else's hands, becoming little by little an object, a toy in the hands of whoever is willing to manipulate it. And no toy remains whole for very long. That's why I deeply believe in the need to set our own goals, to outline aspirations that are born from within, not imposed from the outside. It is essential to stand for something of value, a purpose, a personal truth, and not fall into the trap of being someone who lives only to please, someone who shapes their being according to others' whims. Because if you don't know what you want from life, someone else will know for you, and they won't hesitate to decide. Without that clarity, you become vulnerable, a receptacle for others' desires, a puppet in the hands of every circumstance, an alienated insect, at the mercy of being crushed like Gregor Samsa, consumed by an existence that was never yours, destroyed by the absence of an authentic self. So I ask you, what do you want? Not what others expect from you, not what you were taught to desire, but what resonates within you, what makes you feel alive. Do you see yourself as someone who loves others too much? Have you ever recognized yourself in this role of the pleaser? And if so, what freed you? How did you take the step out of this invisible prison? Share your experience, leave your thoughts and your story in the comments. Let's continue this conversation, this journey of self-knowledge. And as always, thank you for watching. May these reflections find a home in your thoughts, and may we, together, become less like insects and more human.